Traversing the Battlefield, Conservatism and Its Enemies by S.D. Wickett. Political society is made up of three types of people. Those who want to incrementally move on from our way of life, those who want to burn it to the ground, and those who want to preserve it. This is the cultural and spiritual fight that conservatives, reactionaries, and all streams of right-wing thought are up against. However, this can no longer be considered a war, a culture war, or anything including war. War implies that this is a mutually combative state, when in actuality, the war is over. It has been lost. It is no longer a cultural war, but a cultural regime. One which dominates every facet of society, punishing the heretic while venerating the iconoclast and the rioter. The paradigm has flipped on its head. The left has become the stiff authoritarian figure, wagging its index finger in disapproval, while the right has become the rebel, with its middle finger solemnly raised in defiance. It is for this reason, alongside the definition of the term, that conservatism and reactionaryism have become a counterculture, that being an alternative to the mainstream. In the past, I have outlined what I refer to as the trichotomy, that being a reframing of the proverbial battlefield into three camps, two in symbiosis. The trichotomy is made up of the reactionary mind, the progressive mind, and the utopian mind. Each can be defined loosely on two metrics, its societal virtue and its attitude towards change. The progressive mind is the most potent. It is what we'd call the establishment or the elite. They are the inhabitants of the post-war progressive order. Its cultural ascendance came in the 1960s, and the subsequent wave of technocracy, supranationalism, and metropolitan elitism. The progressive mind views change as inevitable and desirable, yet its approach is incremental, coming over decades and going unnoticed. Abundance is the progressive virtue, abundance of money, of power, of consumer goods, and grandiose social schemes designed to see what they can make a human being do. The utopian is the more aggressive and antagonistic mind of the three. Utopianism has taken many forms since the Enlightenment, and today manifests itself with black masks and red flags. The summer of 2020 was a major victory for the utopian sensibilities. Its language of abolition and liberation entered public consciousness at an unprecedented speed. Perfection is the credo of utopianism, and revolution is its preferred method for reorganizing society. Lastly, we have us, me and you listening, I hope. The reactionary mind, prudent and careful in nature. The reactionary mind recognizes the inheritance we receive and our obligation to pass it on relatively unscathed. Conservative is something of a misnomer, as conservatism is born from the realization that something has gone horribly wrong and a reverting of principles is needed. Call them reactionaries or conservatives, we value order in society and have a skeptical view of change. At first, it may seem to be a fight of us against them, that the establishment has become infected with utopianism, and the two have thus melded into one. Yet if you dig deeper, this assumption unravels. A common mistake in the perception of the battlefield espoused by those on the right are that those in positions of significant power are of the radical left, i.e. the utopian mind. Individuals like Joe Biden, Mark Zuckerberg, the Clintons, Obama, and that the CEOs of Twitter, Google, and Amazon are raving leftists. In reality, they are whores who see their personal growth in the proliferation of utopian rhetoric. The gulf between Antifa and the DNC does not need to be pointed out, less so after significant protests against the Biden administration in the utopian territories of the northwestern USA. Ask yourself if you really believe that Apple, Nike and Starbucks are telling the truth when they declare their passion for social justice. Utopians may be in the HR department, but they are not in the boardroom. The coalition between the progressive and utopian mind is what carried Joe Biden to victory in 2020. It was a potent mix of big tech manipulation, a politicized mass media, a lopsided press, and aggressive street activism. A cultural regime, if you will. Though the victory was narrow, almost too close for comfort. If you believe they won fair, that is. To better understand the nature of this symbiosis, we must start with defining levels of the regime. So far, I have identified three: the architect class, the minion class, and the demolition class. Firstly, we have the architect class, the few and far between who inflict a level of top-down change vastly disproportionate of their size within the wider population. These are your tech CEOs, your world leaders, and the heads of supranational institutions. They are followed closely by the minion class, who ruthlessly and unscrupulously enact whatever the set agenda is. In this grouping, you may find journalists, prolific activists, and cultural figures, i.e. celebrities. Lastly, you have the demolition class, the faceless street activists who push the limits of progressive acceptability. The demolition class is the most volatile, and unlike the minion class, it cannot be contained. It is in this that the seeds of the unravelling are sown. As the demolition class push into new extremes, opinion is split among the minion class, made up of half elitist progressives and half urban millennial and Gen Z utopians. Regardless of the DNA of the regime and its destined demise, the situation remains the same. Conservatives and reactionaries find themselves far outside of the Overton window. Even mildly anti-regime sentiments are aggressively chased out of public discourse. If you advocate for the nuclear family, you are a sexist. If you advocate for the consumption of meat instead of bugs, you don't care about the climate crisis. If you honour the flag, you're a jingoistic racist who fetishizes the British Empire. If you object to the feminization of men and the masculating of women, you're a transphobe of the most contemptible variety. This is the sharpened blade of the cultural regime, its ability to weaponize scandal, yet it also can be a weakness. Think of the base draft, for instance. As strong people are pushed out, only the weak are left behind. The right must see the futility of culture warring, of pointing out the hypocrisy of the regime, of protesting for anti-regime action. This is simply not how a beast is slain. A hungry beast must be starved, not attacked. In order to defeat the cultural regime, one must first reject it and resent it. Reject the paradigm, ignore the jargon, give it no power, starve the beast. While seemingly omnipotent and omnipresent, the progressive edifice is collapsing all around us. Its economic and social philosophies are coming undone under the brutal light of life in the 21st century. It will either be the reactionary or the utopian mind which occupies the remains. This is how we win. We must adapt our mind from a method of top-down social change to a vehicle of self and communal betterment. The naturally desirable traits we offer, communitarianism, patriotism, and restraint, will provide a clearly better alternative to the toxic environment caused by the utopian emphasis on required speech and testing of purity. Do not behave like the enemy. Love and be kind, forgive mistakes, treat man like the flawed but virtuous being he is. To reject the cultural regime is to ignore it, to keep it out of your life, and to not behave like it. Lastly, the most potent word in the English language for those in our shoes is no. Just say no. No to the denigration of this country. No to the subversion of its culture. No to historical censorship. No to radicalized and racialized narratives. No to the blatantly contrived sense of moral superiority of the cultural regime. Just say no. Thank you for listening to this Bournbrook essay. You can read our print issues and online articles at bournbrookmag.com, and you can support Bournbrook at bournbrookmag.com/subscribe.